He has a lot of information. I don't know if you have any follow-up about the Bundy Ranch. Do you know anything about that? Maybe. Okay, let us know what CSPOA is still doing, or if there's any news about that sheriff that got in trouble or any of that background that you had brought us, and maybe update. Also, definitely the border crisis is what's going on, but I'm sure he wants you to talk about that maybe when he's in here, I think, right?
Well, we don't, I mean,
Yeah.
he's got his job to do.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
I don't really need to wait.
Okay, cool. And so about that, touch on that, answer some.
Oh,
okay.
I'm in touch with some other people, so.
Okay, and then, so let us know about the border thing, and then lead into some of the problems we have with Judge Jenkins, because then I sure would like,
Okay, yeah, I'll try to set that up.
set it up for him to lead.
And my disclaimer is basically that these things are, a lot of this is my opinion. I've tried to, as Regina said, do a lot of reading, as I know many of you do. Some of you in this room are good about sending me emails and have. Since our last talk, which was in January.
Oh, it was January?
Right, I remember I had lost my voice.
Yeah, that's right.
And I had just gotten back from the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association conference in Las Vegas at the end of January. Now that's the event where sheriffs and there were county commissioners and county judges, even some state legislators and others gathered, and Chris Ann Hall was there. She's a constitutional attorney, one of the great teachers of the Constitution.
And John's got a DVD on her.
And so we crafted a resolution which is at CSPOA.org. That stands for the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. And if you go to that website and click on Resolution tab, I encourage you to read it. And you can sign it as a citizen, as a patriot, if you agree. I would encourage you to do that. And also to print copies of it and take it to your city council members, your county commissioners, your county judge, your sheriff, wherever you live. I'm not going to assume that you all necessarily live in Dallas County. But does anyone in here not live in Dallas County? Okay, so you all live in Dallas County? Okay, great.
Excuse me, can I ask, what were the callers again?
CSPOA.org. CSPOA.org. And I'm a member of that group. There's going to be another conference coming up in September. It will be in Virginia. And a lot has happened. Regina's right, since we met in January, the whole Bundy Ranch situation happened. Of course, this situation ongoing on the border is happening. And so there'll be lots to talk about, I'm sure, in Virginia. And then on Constitution Day, the day following the conference in Virginia in September, we'll be at the National Press Club in DC for a special event. And CSPOA is an organization that was founded by former Sheriff Richard Mack. He was a sheriff in Arizona, and there was a Supreme Court case. It's known as the Mack-Prince decision. It involved Brady legislation, handgun control legislation in the 90s, which was found unconstitutional. And Justice Scalia wrote that decision. You can look that up. So just a little bit about my background. My name is Kirk Launius, and I'm a native Dallasite, former Dallas police officer. I served on the Dallas Police Force until 2006. I'm a Navy veteran, served in Japan and Korea the last few years of my career. And I attend a church here in the Dallas area that's mostly Asian Americans, a lot of people from Korea, but other Asian countries. So I have a lot of interest in what goes on in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, Philippines, and that was our area of operation for 7th Fleet, which was I started out as a reservist, and then I did some active duty towards the end. So left the Dallas Police Department, then came back, and rather than get directly back into law enforcement and working as a police officer again, I started a security consulting company called Vulnerability Assessment and Resolution Incorporated, and my business partner is a National Guard member, but as an officer, he's not able to talk with the media without clearance, and he can do that. He's looking into that, but he couldn't talk as immediately as he would have liked tonight. And, but we bring military-style vulnerability assessments to the commercial and civilian world and install security systems and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting because years ago in Dallas, back in the 90s, Brent and I were working at a telecommunications company, that's my business partner, and we were talking about starting a business, something security related. And was Buck Gravel. He was a former agent in charge of the FBI here in Dallas. And I remember him telling me, actually it was right across the street at the Angelica Theater, he had an event for, I think it was sponsored by the Dallas Press Club or something like that. This was before 9/11. And he had written some white papers on counterterrorism. And I remember him saying to me, if you want to work in the security industry in the future, you need to get as much military and law enforcement experience as you can. And this was prior to 9/11. So I joined the Dallas Police Force and the U.S. Navy Reserves at the same time, which was kind of crazy. But it all worked out. And then, of course, 9/11 happened. And the U.S. Navy gave me 6 months of authorized absence from my monthly drills over at the Naval Air Station in Fort Worth in order for me to complete my field training with the Dallas Police Department. So I thought that was pretty cool. They were very patient with me to work my way through not only the police academy, but the approximately 4 or 5 months of field training, which I did in southeast Dallas. So I used to patrol the area around Fair Park, South Dallas, Pleasant Grove, and saw a lot of things there. I was also later assigned to the Homeland Security Detail, and I would, on any given night, I usually work night shift, I would be assigned to security of maybe the water treatment plant. I also had a Secret Service clearance, and I was on the augmentation detail for Secret Service. So, we had Vice President Cheney at the time, had a residence in Dallas. President Bush at the time would come through town a lot. Other people like Secretary of State, and I remember the Saudi Prince at one time was staying at the mansion down on Turtle Creek, and we were involved with some of that security, transporting from the mansion up to Love Field and back. So yeah, I've gotten to see and do a lot of interesting things. But in the last few years, as Regina pointed out, I ran for sheriff in 2012. And they said I got 42% of the vote. And one of the speakers, was it Sandra Crenshaw,
Yes.
talked a lot about the election fraud that's been rampant in Dallas County. And I've had numerous people, especially in the southern sector of the county, say, they put their arm around my shoulder and say, Kirk, you can just bump up your total. Whatever they tell you, you probably got about 3% more of the fraud factor. Now, I can't prove that, but I've got different theories about it. If you ever want to talk about concerns about our election process in Dallas County, I'm sure Ron here, who's a former Dallas City Council member, might have some opinions about that as well. So got pretty close, 42% is not bad for the first go-around in a countywide race. Had a shoestring budget. I think we ran the campaign on about $50,000 in donations. Put signs everywhere. And yeah, so those signs are still in a warehouse somewhere, and we got to get this gentleman, Ron Natinsky, elected as county judge first here in 2014, and then we can talk about 2016 election will be the next go-around for sheriff. But the sheriff's race is always up against the presidential election year. So that's my segue into what's going on at the border. Of course, President Obama came into town, and it's basically a photo op, fundraising opportunity, and he didn't go down to the border. Our governor did, and I saw Sean Hannity, for example, one of the media people down on the border taking the tour that the president should have had. A week ago, was it a little more than a week ago, last weekend, so not this past, what is today, Monday?
Yeah.
It's just a blur. Yeah, so not yesterday and Saturday, but the previous week, I went down to the Texas border with Charles Lingerfeld, who's also running in a countywide race in this election cycle. It's great man, just like Ron. We need to get him elected as well. He's running for treasurer, county treasurer.
So Charles called me up a few weeks ago and he said, I want to organize a bus tour of the border. And he was putting the call out for people. And there were a lot of interested people, but as the date got closer, people just said, I just really can't afford to take the time off. And so finally Charles just said that he thought that we ought to just go on down there on our own, and would I be willing to go with him? And I said, sure, that's great. And I thought, on the way down to Del Rio and Eagle Pass, we ought to stop through and visit one of the sheriffs that I know from the CSPOA, and she's the sheriff in Edwards County, Texas. Now, Edwards County I think it has a population under 2,000 people. During hunting season, the population rises considerably, but it's a beautiful area. It's west of Kerrville, if any of you know where that is. And we went out through Stephenville and down through Dublin, and I love those little towns out there. Went on through Brady, Texas, which is supposedly the heart of Texas, and then we went on down to Rock Springs, which is in Edwards County, and had lunch with Sheriff Pamela Elliott. And she is a former U.S. Marine and she's an Army veteran. She's still in the reserves. She's an Army officer. And she's also the sheriff of this Edwards County that's one of the 254 counties in Texas. And she's doing a great job. She's cleaning house down there. Just to her south in Maverick County, which is the county where Eagle Pass is, they've had house cleaning. I think 32 or 33 people have been indicted or convicted. I think it's all still in process for fraud and corruption. I think people at the city and the county level both. So the people down around Eagle Pass have really been through the ringer, and I encourage you to pray for them because their whole world's been turned upside down over the last few years. People they thought they could trust just ripped off the taxpayers. And we're just having a field day down there until the Texas Rangers and the FBI came in and cleaned house. So Sheriff Tom Schmerber is the first sheriff to be elected in Maverick County since that house cleaning. And he didn't really have any time for us. He's just very busy. But we did spend the night in Del Rio. And if any of you know that area, as you move in from Rock Springs to the north, there's rolling granite hills. It's very rugged terrain. They're about 63 miles north of Del Rio in Rock Springs. So as you drive south down Highway 377, I think it is, you go into just a very desert area. It kind of looks like New Mexico. It's very rugged, and Sheriff Elliott told me that people who try to make it on foot from the Del Rio sector, which is, there's Amistad Reservoir, coming north, if they're on foot, they might make it 15 miles or 20 miles. But beyond that, unless they make their way back over to one of the highways and get into a vehicle, they're probably going to die out there in the desert. There is a Border Patrol checkpoint about 40 miles, maybe less than that, 35 miles north of Del Rio. And a lot of the locals tell me that those are just kind of harassment points. I don't mean that the agents are being rude to people, but think about it. If you just needed to go from Rock Springs down to Del Rio for the day, and you had to wait 20 minutes or more just sitting there to go through this checkpoint every time you did it, it'd get a little old. And a lot of people, they just wave through, or they ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? And that's pretty much it. If, and the coyotes who are transporting people deeper into the states, into the United States, know where these checkpoints are. So we hear stories about people running on parallel roads to bypass the checkpoints. So I question how effective, those resources are back 20, 30, 40 miles from the border. And then we hear people say that anything within 100 miles of the border, the U.S.-Mexico border is basically a constitution-free zone. And that's the issues I'm talking about, because your rights, you really don't have the same rights when your ability to freely conduct commerce if you're a business person. Or just go down to the river for go down to Eagle Pass for the day, or visit your grandmother or whoever is impeded. Well, that's trampling on our rights. So those are the kinds of issues. We didn't really expect to go down there and see, action that we've seen on other parts of the border. In 2012, during that election cycle in September, Tom Haney, who's a Dallas police officer, and I went to Hudspeth County, Texas, which is the county just east of El Paso, and literally there you can walk across the border. There's no fence at all in that particular section that they showed us. If you go a little bit to the east towards Sierra Blanca, which is the checkpoint for the stars, that's where Willie Nelson and I think Snoop Dogg and who was the other person? There were these celebrities that have been caught with drugs there on Interstate 10 at the Border Patrol checkpoint are then handed over to Sheriff Arvin West in Hudspeth County, and you've probably seen that on the news about this checkpoint just east of El Paso, known as the checkpoint to the stars. Well, they do have a fence, but the fence is discontinuous, and it runs for a few miles, but then it just stops. And they took us to that point where there's a concrete barrier about this high, and then this brown metal fence that goes up maybe another, 18 feet or so, maybe 25 feet. But it just stops, and there are cattle grazing right down to the river. There's literally just a barbed wire fence, and they pulled it back, and we walked through, and you could walk into the dry riverbed of the Rio Grande, which was no wider than this from here to the front of this restaurant. It was just dry as a bone, and you could walk across it. But around Del Rio and Eagle Pass, you don't really see the river unless you're, say, right in Eagle Pass. Further to the west of Eagle Pass, between Del Rio and Eagle Pass, is desert. The river is kind of hidden to the south as you go along the highway there. There's ranches. Some of them have exotic animals, and it's basically tourism and ranching. And we didn't see much. We did see some Border Patrol trucks coming out of these side roads where there were gates that they had a chain with multiple locks. And I guess the Border Patrol have keys. So the ranchers and the Border Patrol work together they have access to these lands, but you wouldn't want to get caught out there at night. We went through during the day. Now, I will say in Del Rio, during the night, this was Friday night, I woke up to the sound of police sirens and helicopters, and I didn't hear any gunfire, but I was waiting for that to come next. And it was some kind of a chase. I believe Border Patrol was involved, probably sheriff's deputies and the Del Rio police, as best I could tell. And it came from the east and moved past us on the main drag there in Del Rio, and I was just listening to it and saw the police helicopters, or it might have been Border Patrol or state troopers, the DPS helicopter, I don't know. And it just kind of moved west, and that was it. So I guess that's common down there near the border. And I asked Charles about it the next morning, and he was so exhausted he didn't even hear it, slept through it. So the next day we drove on down to Eagle Pass, and we did see the Border Patrol checkpoint again along the way, which is north of Eagle Pass, but the International Bridge has Border Patrol. It's Customs and Border Patrol agents working there. And honestly, they looked to be short-staffed. There weren't that many of them there. There were a lot of people lined up on the bridge, crossing, mostly coming into the U.S., but there were other people going back into Mexico. And it's a very long concrete pillar bridge that has basically a tall fence on either side, not just a railing, but big like chain link that goes the length of the river. And the river was, I'd say, 150 to 200 yards from where the merchant sector, the marketplace there in Eagle Pass is located, which is where the vehicles come off the bridge, and then they go, if they wave them aside to be inspected, they go under this covered area. So I was setting up a shot to do a video. I was standing on a public street corner in Eagle Pass, and Charles had my phone. I was just setting up the shot, telling him what I was going to do. and I was kind of walking him through it, and he was just kind of checking out, make sure he had a clear sight line. And before we could even get started, I hear this guy yelling, "Hey, hey!" And Charles said, "Hey, somebody's trying to get your attention." And I said, "I know, I'm trying to do a video." And I assumed it was because it was coming from the direction of the Customs and Border Patrol area, that it was one of the Border Patrol agents and the Customs agents. And sure enough, he wanted to get my attention, so I went across the street, and he wanted to talk to me. I wasn't too thrilled that he had summoned me over there, because I'm just, what am I, not doing anything wrong. I'm on a public street corner, and anything that we would take a picture of or video is in plain view. But he wanted to know what we were doing, and I asked him why. And he didn't seem too satisfied with that answer. He says, "Well, you can't take pictures or video." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, thanks, have a nice day." And he goes, "Well, no, I need to know what you're doing." I says, "Well, why? Why do you need to know?" And he was a little frustrated with that, so he called on his radio for supervisor, and Charles' eyes kind of lit up a little bit. But I wasn't too worried, because I know the authority or lack thereof, so I then turned on my phone and made sure I was recording. And they were polite, and I just informed him that I didn't need to really tell him what I was doing or why. But I did say that we're down from Dallas County, and we just, we had been made contact with the sheriff here in Maverick County, Sheriff Schmerber, and had a great visit this morning. Everything was going great until now. And in fact, the sheriff had encouraged us to take a look around. So do you have any problem with that? And the supervisor didn't. He just said, actually the agent, who was a young guy, his uniform was very clean and crisp. The supervisor's uniform was kind of faded, so I could tell he'd probably been working for a long time there. But before the supervisor came out, the younger agent said, "Can I see your phone?" And I just burst out laughing, and I'm going, "No, you can't see my phone. Are you crazy?" I said, "This is my property. No way. Are you kidding me?" And so he knew he didn't have any authority, but they still try. And
How do they train these people?
I guess so. Well, that's what I wondered, if this is really training or if it's just what he thought he should do. I don't know.
Kirk, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What was the most shock of your whole visit from A to Z? Was there anything that shocked you, or something that stands out as the most shocking from anything like that was beyond your expectation?
Probably that the Border Patrol in a particular area, and I'm not going to say which area it is, because I think the local law enforcement there has their hands full as it is, but they don't really have a lot of support. Our federal tax dollars are supposed to be paying for all of this Border Patrol, and you would expect them to be right down there on the border doing this, but really just that this task of securing our border is falling to Texans. It's falling to the Department of Public Safety, game wardens, who are peace officers as well, and the local sheriffs. And it's, I have a lot of confidence in my fellow Texas peace officers, but they need a lot of support and help. And before we started, I was asking the reporter who was here about what he had heard today about any pushback against Governor Perry's announcement that there's going to be 1,000 National Guard troops into the border. And maybe some of you have read some news more recently than I have. I did manage to look up a story about a sheriff. What do you know this afternoon? What's the latest?
Josh Earnest today was asked about it at the White House in the afternoon briefing, and he completely took a very left-wing take and said, well, what they should really be doing is coming to a bipartisan agreement. Total nonsense.
Yeah, they want to push through.
So they're pushing that.
immigration
They are
reform.
very against, obviously, Perry doing the right thing
sure.
for the 1,000. The number being floated, by the way, is $12 million a month to the taxpayers of Texas for 1,000 National Guard per month. That's the guesstimated number is 12 million. So he looks very presidential, and the person occupying the White House looks very non-presidential.
Yeah.
From the report I literally just 5 minutes ago.
Well, yes.
I would just suggest on this issue, if you haven't done it, everyone should go on YouTube and watch Immigration by the Numbers. And
Is
if you haven't
that
seen it,
the Numbers
you'll-
USA, or which group put that together?
I don't know who put that together, but it is so compelling.
Yeah, we're going to have to get the truth through, obviously not through the mainstream media, but through The video with Zach Taylor, who's a retired Border Patrol officer, I think he's in the Tucson sector in Arizona, gives his theory of why this is being concentrated, people coming through the McAllen sector. Because one thing, I guess I expected that we would see more activity in the Eagle Pass, Del Rio area, but then a friend in El Paso told me that they're not seeing much of anything either different. There's still a lot of people coming over, but this surge, or whatever you want to call it, to me seems to be concentrated in the McAllen area and up to Laredo. And that's what the people in Eagle Pass told us. There's a golf course right down on the river. We walked up to some gentlemen playing golf. I'm sure they wondered where we came from. Did we fall out of a tree or what? And one man was willing to talk to us, but he kind of lowered his voice. He didn't want, I guess, his friends to hear what he was saying. You could tell this is kind of a touchy subject. He says, I don't really like to get involved. He says, and he was Hispanic, but he was a resident of Eagle Pass. He just said, but I can tell you that if you go south down the river to the southeast towards Laredo and then on to McAllen, of course, you're going to see a lot more activity. It's a lot worse down there. Now, the Border Patrol supervisor did tell us that people are swarming. That was the word that he used. But it's happening at night, even in the Eagle Pass sector. So I would say that, from the Del Rio area down all the way in through McAllen is where most of this is happening. The question is, why is it happening there? And if you will Google Zach Taylor, Border Patrol, there's a YouTube video, I posted it on my Facebook as well, and he'll give his theory. He thinks that it's a controlled event. He thinks that, while one hand of the government is doing this, we need to be watching what else is going on. If it's, cartel orchestrated, if it's Russian mafia, if it's biological attack in the form of, I'm hearing things about dengue fever and Ebola and, different viruses that haven't been seen here in a long time or at all.
I heard that they're coming out with information and proof that this has been planned over 2 years, a lot of these things, and we all could guess these things, because there's no way this could come along the way it is, without some prior trying.
Yeah.
But now the evidence and people are talking.
And I know Representative Granger from Fort Worth area, she went down to Honduras, and she might be a good speaker about what she saw, but the situation with the illnesses is very troubling, because they're saying they're finding people that have, shivering type symptoms, and we don't even know the extent of what it is and where these people are being taken. Not reports through my visit, but through people like Zach Taylor said that Border Patrol agents and customs agents are telling him that these people are just being removed from the centers and taken somewhere. That there are shortages of saline and medical supplies, and having family in Arizona, they're in the medical profession. I've sent them messages. I haven't heard back yet, but are they experiencing any shortages of things like saline, medical supplies that could indicate that these resources are being siphoned off, towards dealing with this potential epidemic?
And Rinaldi, this is his first name.
Matt
Rinaldi.
Matt Rinaldi, he went down to the border also.
Yeah.
And he was down there and he actually saw some things. So he's somebody we need to support too, Matt Rinaldi.
So kind of to turn the corner on this, in this presentation, and to wrap it up, this update, I have to think, I'm sorry, you have a question?
Take some questions.
Back in, I don't know what year, but it was before 2007, it was after 9/11. There was a $375 million contingency contract that the Department of Homeland Security granted Kellogg Brown and Root, which is a Halliburton subsidiary, to be able to house up to 400,000 illegal aliens or for other purposes. So that was way back before 2007. It was well after 9/11. I don't know the exact year, but the point is that I find that interesting. Now we're actually having detention centers popping up now. Alex Jones has talked about this a lot. If you follow prisonplanet.com, you see them talking about, on military bases, detention centers for these illegals. So if this is a controlled event, that may be one of the ulterior motives. Set up detention centers and have that become a palatable option to the American people for these, this underclass that's coming into the country, number one. Number two, if the country is bankrupt, and it is, and if it is going authoritarian and towards a police state, which it is, then sealing the border in a militaristic manner, in order not just to keep people out, but to keep people in, would be another logical goal. The addition of a National Guard or being added to the border, while it would be good for keeping the wrong elements out of the United States, could also be a problem keeping people in America in.
Well, one discussion I heard, I was listening to earlier today, talked about, I think it was Sarah Palin had made the comment that there's certain aspects of this that are unfunded, but there certainly seems to be a lot of money flowing. So I wouldn't say it's unfunded now, whether it's just fiat money, I mean, that's another discussion. Dr. Edwin Vieira, who I talked about in January, is an expert on that, as well as the whole issue of the constitutional homeland security, which is the militia of the several states, as mentioned in the Constitution. But I noticed an article last night, there's a group in Austin, this is just one example, Austin-based company given huge federal grant for immigrant shelters, and I think it was somewhere along the lines of 60 million. That's just one example, but a lot of money, being parceled out to different groups, different religious organizations. There's a lot of discussion going on about whether certain church groups should or shouldn't, and it's divisive. I mean, and the discussion needs to take place, but I think part of this, and I would ask your opinion,
John, you want to-
if this fits a Cloward-Piven model. How many of you have heard of
Yes, completely. It's a whole.
the overwhelming of the resources of a constitutional republic in order to achieve basically the destruction of the constitutional republican form of government? It could be an attack on many fronts. It's certainly going to have an economic aspect. We're seeing it could have a health aspect, and
Another thing too is there's been a big debate internally in the Republican Party about adopting, trying to include Hispanics in the Republican Party because they should be, because they work, they are family oriented, they're religious, and so on. This may bias the Republican Party towards having a more quote-unquote pro-Hispanic set of policies would be another aspect to this. But also, where do they end up putting the children, and where do they end up putting the illegal aliens? If they're putting them in those areas to dilute the Republican vote in specific precincts, that might be yet another agenda. If indeed it is.
well, this firm in Austin, it's actually more than $100 million of federal grant money that has gone to this organization. Now, the man who founded it is also on the board of La Raza. Yeah, and so anyway, that's on Facebook. But as for the constitutional issues, people say, what can we do? And this goes back to part of my discussion back in January about the nature of the militia of the several states, which is covered in Article 1, Section 8 about Clause 15, the militia clause, and 16, it spells out what the role of Congress is in funding and making sure that the militia of the several states have the equipment and the tactics, but it doesn't put the federal government in a position of superiority or supremacy in that pyramid, if you will. Their role is just to ensure that those militia of the several states are equipped. Now, they can be called into the actual service of the United States. And I'm not necessarily speaking on what's happening, and I mean, we're all being realistic about it. We know the world is, Mark Levin talks about a post-constitutional era. Whether we're in that or not is a different discussion, but if Congress has just basically handed over the keys to the executive, and then they talk about filing a lawsuit to rein in, I mean, okay, so let me get this straight. You have one branch of the federal government that wants to sue another branch of the federal government, and in doing so appeal to a third branch of the federal government to referee this whole thing. I mean, are we going to really get anywhere? Well, you can guess what the result's going to be. It's just going to be a natural tendency towards enriching of its own power, meaning the federal government, because the Supreme Court is just, and the federal judges are branches of the same federal government, and when left to their own devices, they tend to expand and increase their own power.
Since they're all lawyers anyways.
Going well beyond, well, the solution, Sheriff Mack wrote a book called The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. And, I don't know what, some of you have heard this before, but if your view of the sheriff is coming from television shows or movies, then you may have a different opinion right now. But if you study the issue and you look at going back to the colonial days prior to the writing of the Constitution, they had over 150 years of history, and even more with, if you follow the history of the sheriff. But the militia structure, that's why in the Constitution it's not defined. The office of the president was a new thing when the Constitution was written, so they had to define it. But because the Constitution is not a dictionary, they had to define some new things like president. But when it came to the militia, they didn't have to, because every able-bodied male between 16 and 60, basically, was already a member of the militia. And not only had a right, but a duty to keep a well-maintained arm. And interestingly enough, ammo. And interestingly enough, those were of the same grade as the military level arms. You could make an argument whether the Kentucky rifle was superior to the British rifle or whatnot, but they were basically the same. And so that's where we have that's the history of the militia of the several states. Of course, the Second Amendment says that only one thing is necessary, and this is the only thing that's spoken of as being necessary in the Constitution, and that is a well-regulated militia. Being necessary to what? The security of a free state. Yes?
There's one thing that you're not seeing about this, a lot of people aren't saying, is when they're reporting on the plane crash over there, they are bastardizing militia and they're bastardizing rebels.
I'm well aware of that.
And that's exactly what's
And
going on.
that's gone on for decades.
This is all part of the plan.
Well, of course.
And
Why do you think I'm not seeing that? That's going on for decades. I mean, you could talk about back in the 1960s, I forget the name of the group, but it was some radical group that caused basically the American public's view of the word militia. But, okay, great. But it's still in our Constitution, and it still has a history, and it still has a truth associated with it. So our goal, I think what you're pointing to is our job is we have a hell of an educational effort that we need to undertake. Is that?
Well, no, what I'm getting at is the Constitution's been put on hold.
Well, okay. I'm not making that argument. Yeah, I mean.
These people are oppressing us and pushing us down.
Absolutely.
And
So
I agree with the Constitution.
she asked, what do we do? What do we do? So the power, who are the sovereigns? Well, okay. Then I guess my talk is over.
Right?
Okay. Yes, sir.
The greatest concern now is the UN now want to abolish the Constitution of the United States.
Sure, that's the goal. Absolutely.
John Gentry is next before he falls.
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to slight. I mean, I agree with you to that extent. But the answer, if the sovereign power is with we the people, it's to the state. Any power not delegated to the federal government falls to the state and to we the people.
I agree.
It's to you and to me and everyone in this room and everyone, whether they're ignorant of the fact or not, driving by, and a lot of them are, most of them are, but they're still the sovereign. And so the power there falls to us to, as Dr. Vieira points out, is to revitalize the militia of the several states. There's nothing that's ever been changed in the Constitution that's wiped that away. It needs to be revitalized. And I think what Governor Perry is running up against when he has sheriffs who say, we don't really want the National Guard down here, because I'll tell you right now, they're not going to be able to arrest anybody. They're not going to be able to arrest anybody. We're not, like the sheriff is just basically going to say they're not peace officers. And they're right. They're saying that money could be better spent. Look at all the deputies we could hire. Now, what the sheriff needs to tell you is that he has able-bodied men and women in his or her county that he can call upon and deputize and say, get your butt up here, we need your help.
I like that.
whether they're paid or not.
They're not gonna do what the border patrol agents are doing, is getting the hell out of there.
Well, we're Texans. I mean, I don't know that. On a county by county wide basis, it might happen. You may have people that are just basically cowards and are gonna run and head for the hills, and
No, I mean, the reason they're running is because of the disease that's coming over. They're freaking
I
out.
grant you that.
And they're overwhelmed and they're not able to do their jobs.
Yeah, no, I'm telling, I agree, it's a daunting task.
Not only letting them in, they're giving them money to put them on buses and ship them.
I totally agree with you, but if Texas, if you look at the Texas economy, and I'm not under any, delusions that this is gonna be a simple thing. I mean, actually, the answer is simple, it's not gonna be an easy thing. The answer is simple, because we already have that power. We need to demand that our state legislators pass modernizing legislation. This is not anything that is necessary to make it legal, because it already exists. I mean, and it's a militia with a capital M, not any little private militia group that, these are not lawful groups, but that the governor can activate, can call upon, and on a county by county basis, under the direction and the command of the governor through the county sheriff, who's the only elected law enforcement official. But I'll ask you this question, what other option is there?
Well, on Jones today, he had this, I can't remember the guy's name. He had this gentleman on that was based out of California. He got the hell out of there, you know why? He's in Arizona. And this guy is one of the pioneers of border security. He's the one who forced Border Patrol into UAVs. And he has a website, and I can get it to you, but if you go to the Alex Jones archive and listen to the second hour, you'll hear him.
So he's retired from Border Patrol, or is he like a?
He's still active. He
Okay.
moved to the border. He's on the border because he's had it. He's seen this
Yeah.
coming for years. He's predicted it. Even Alex
Well,
was
I think
like,
that's what Zach Taylor's talking about, what the other hand is doing while we're being distracted by. And I think we can talk about whether, the news reports are saying it's gonna be more than 2,000 kids, right?
If I tell you now, you'll listen to me later.
No, we're
Well,
gonna
that's the
listen
other
to
problem.
John Gentry,
I'm about to jump out.
Kurt,
It's just
let's,
tag team.
John, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't see the bright
Okay, this
lights.
is kind of a combination question here,
Yeah.
and this has to do with Bundy Ranch and the sheriff in that county, which is what county again? It's,
Clark,
Clark County. And somehow it was at least alleged by some of the people there that the sheriff tried to get something going by giving them false information. That there was some kind of agreement, so they're marching down there to go agree to get the cattle back. And then the detail comes out, the sheriff is on the board of the local Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, for the last at least 2 decades, the main agent of propaganda demonizing the militia and many constitutional issues has been the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Not
Along with
surprising,
the ADL, the lists they create. And I believe that recently, after the campaign of a general, I believe Army general, they delisted or delinked the Southern Poverty Law Center from the FBI page.
Yeah.
But they still play a fundamental role in law enforcement training across this country. For what reason, I have no.
yeah, I don't know, I know people who were on the ground there, who I can put you in touch with if you want to interview them, who were actually underneath the interstate bridge where the cattle were, or the pen, the confrontation, or whatever you want to call it, standoff, who can tell you exactly what happened, who were there personally. So if you'd like to get in touch with those people. I was actually on the phone with one of them when they were hearing in the background that the BLM were going to shoot them. So I didn't know if I was going to hear gunfire or what in the next few minutes, but yeah. Al?
Just a suggestion, if budget is a problem in some of those counties and so forth, why couldn't someone, you would be obviously in a position to do that very well, go down and form an organization of volunteers. There are all kinds of hunters down there. And these people could actually affiliate with whatever agency it is that would be responsible, and even get training from them to say
Exactly.
volunteer.
In
one day a
Edwards
week.
County, they have an active branch of the Texas militia that trains with the sheriff. I mean, it's very, yeah.
And Kurt, I actually talked to a member of the Texas State Guard, which I don't know if that's Texas militia or not, but this young man I believe he had some military, they were literally using him up down on the border. He was saying, I'm running out of resources, I mean, I barely got food and everything, and they keep deploying me back down there and so forth. This actually brings up one huge question. We have Governor Rick Perry. Years ago, doing an interview with Colonel W. Craig Roberts, he was saying there never has been a militia problem, there never will be, because all that governor has to do is call them up, and then they're under the governor's command. Okay, that's.
And they don't fall under the UCMJ or Title 10 or
I
Title
know,
15.
you still got, do you have a constitutionally minded governor? Then that becomes.
That's the real question, and I think that's what Governor Perry, what's going to play out. That's why it was interesting to hear about the comments from the White House today, and what some of you have heard, through the news media or just through the grapevine. I think that's a big drama that's playing out today, and I don't know that all the news outlets are catching that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Kirk, I go back 15 years with Kirk, so I know him well. He's very articulate. And you've improved since the last time I was.
Oh, thank you. I'm not a professional speaker.
I'm a psychologist. I don't do that work now. I'm more of an investor. I'm concerned about those kids down there from a psychological point of view, and nobody has said anything. I hold the Obama's people responsible for the psychological problems of these little girls and guys here. Can you know the nightmares they're having over and over, crying out for Obama and all this stuff? And I blame the government for that, because that thing, kids just didn't get up one day and all going at one time. This is an orchestrated thing, and it's just like it's close to being demonic. It's ridiculous. And they never addressed this, but as a psychologist, I'm very concerned about those kids.
Yeah.
Do you know the psychological monies that will happen when they get 20 years old, 22 years old? Who's going to pay the price? We're going to pay the price. Nobody brings up those psychological bills, but you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and two things. You know how much money it's going to cost you, and how many are really going to get help?
They're gonna get trust.
Yeah, and that's what, to me, is such a shame in all of this, is that, Saul Alinsky's strategy was all about divide and conquer. And when you have people in the churches, people in the nonprofit, charity groups, good people fighting amongst each other about should we or shouldn't we? And honestly, I don't have a problem with people who want to go down, and these kids do need help, because these are scars that aren't going to, they're permanent.
That's right.
I'm sorry, you have a question?
Oh, that's okay. I'm just going to say two things. The scripture says God has given us authority over all the power of the enemy. It's a matter of exercising that authority. So if we stand up, we have wonderful, Jesus said, if you bring a sign out and stand out and you have a megaphone, they tell you to put it away, that's fine, or a sound system. But if you don't go and talk to people, if you don't go and with your sign, I finally made my sign, and I've got my own thing, and I've made signs before, but if you don't go and do, of course you're not gonna see any hope. I don't feel hope.
I would encourage anyone here to go down for yourself, and trust me, she asked what's the most shocking thing I saw. I didn't really see shocking things. I got to talk to some people, but it opened doors, because people that knew that I made the effort to go are now sending me information that I wouldn't be receiving emails and texts and calls about, little tips on, we're getting a little better picture of what's really going on here.
I just said one other thing. And, my background is Alamo. Okay, so you have the scenario of the dysfunctional children. Okay, you cannot go. Okay, you got a grandmother and a son and a child. That grandmother raised an alcoholic son. Okay, that son has children. Okay, as much as you want to protect that grandchild, you are not that person's parent. Okay, unless you legally go and have those parental rights discontinued, you have no right to touch that kid. That's not your child. Okay, so you can sit here and say these poor children. I sat with a lot of grandmothers in those Al-Anon meetings who were beside themselves wanting to control what happened to these kids. But they don't, unless they adopt those kids, which they, in my opinion, have no right to do because they screwed up their own kids. Okay, so are we gonna let these thousands of children that are already all messed up from their drug addict parents or the cartels or whatever they're doing, you bring them into America and give them to people, foster parents, who are on, getting foster kids just for the money and abusing their own children. I mean, it's just, it's,
Send them
what
back.
are we doing? What are we thinking we're doing?
Well,
Trying
and
to
that's
raise
a question, because some
another
people who
bunch of
say,
dysfunctional kids.
let's go do this, you should go down and help these kids and wherever they are, McAllen, or bring them up to Dallas or whatever, have never raised a finger to do anything at all to help these people in their home country. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I want to use an example here that I went through law school at SMU, and when we got in crimes to murder, the first two cases we studied were true cases of shipwrecks. Ships went down in storms. One was British, one was American. The captain found himself in one of the lifeboats that was, it had too many people in it for anyone to survive. And for anyone to survive, he had to order certain ones over. And he took it upon himself to do that. Had he not done it, they would have all been lost at sea. Those who had to go overboard across were lost. Those two captains were tried for murder. However, what we're looking at here is a sinking ship in a storm, and that's the United States of America. We cannot take these millions more, which it will be, of immigrants that are coming into this country. And if you go onto the Moriarty's website, LibyaandWarTheTruth.com, you will see that Libya is sending thousands of Al-Qaeda radicals over here with Libyan passports. Now, what the hell are they doing here? We know what they're going to do here. They're going to have the third jihad right here in the United States of America. And that's what this is all about, is to destroy the United States. We can't, everybody here has to watch that video. Immigration by the numbers. We simply, physically cannot handle it. The world can't handle it. Millions of these people are going to die. But if we try to take them all in, we all will die too.
We have what's it called, immigration by the numbers, and
The one that he was talking about earlier, it was, that organization, Numbers USA, that you're talking about.
Numbers USA.
Is it related to
You know,
the same group?
immigration by the numbers.
Is the name of is the title of the video.
Off the charts, it's
Yeah.
made by numbers.
Now, ultimately, and this is from my personal perspective, yeah, it's really, it gets, every day and I agree with you, it becomes overwhelming. And I don't see a plan like, we would have a detail at the Southeast Patrol Station, say, well, tonight we're gonna focus on this or that. We're gonna take the calls that we get, but here's our focus tonight. And you basically had a plan, and you could see your way through it, and you could see yourself at the end of an 8 or 10 hour shift, going home, hopefully, and you do it again the next day. Well, with this, you don't really see the end of it because it's so overwhelming. And you'd like to, you think, well, we've just really been had long ago. Long ago. Yeah, so I'm not under any illusions that we, absolutely.
That is the focal point of it.
Yeah.
Well, now, do we really know enough about what is going on here? I mean, there have been some ideas brought up that maybe this is the Obama version of the Hitler Jugend. I mean, maybe these children are going to be recruited by the state into some program.
I think you're right that the sheer numbers of others that we're not even aware of, not just the sick people that are going to some facilities that we're not aware of, are probably much larger numbers than we know. But others who might be, the MS-13, the jihadists and whatnot, to what end?
Yeah, because they're not all coming from Central America or whatever. They're coming from China. They're coming from all over. From what I understand, the price is a little pricier. I guess you come from China, it's $50,000. Someone was giving the rundown of what you pay to get here under these. But there's the whole human trafficking, which I'm sure will burn you quite a bit. We have a
All I know is that God sees this, and He knows what's happening, and those people that are, somebody is orchestrating
Oh,
this
yeah.
mini someone.
This has been
Also
a
groups
plan.
that are very capable, cartels that have military
Yes.
training, for example,
Yes.
and Russian mafia involvement, and others that can exploit this because they see that they can.
And then you have the compassionate people that do see the children. I think they are
And we
very
still
smart.
should be
What
compassionate.
I've always said is the bad guys, you all have heard me say this, they never have one objective, any of them, with their agendas. They have like 5, so that they're always winning. Unfortunately, the good guys, a lot of times, Republicans or whatever, we have one focus, and when we don't make that focus, we've kind of put all our effort into one basket. I've just seen they do this all my life. I see what they do is they have all these objectives and they'll win some of them. And that's okay. The other are still rolling and they'll push on
Now-
them later. So when they bring these kids, they have brought some legitimate family children. That's to tug on the heartstrings of the churches and the people.
And that's a natural
It's a
emotion that we
natural
shouldn't
emotion.
suppress just
And it's-
because this
yeah.
crisis
So
is
then you'll get, I talked to the other
contrived.
side, I talked to the other side, the liberals that are saying, we do need to take care of them, because that's what they're looking at, the compassion side of it. What are we gonna do? But
Send them
then,
to the blue states and let them handle it.
there you go. Well, a lot of people, I thought some of the funny things were is, send them to these people's houses, literally, and let them adopt them, or to the White House. There's lots of bedrooms in the
I was
White
in
House.
I was in a
Right?
conversation with
Yeah.
someone earlier today, and they really, you could tell, because the pastor at their church is pleading for the members to donate and
I
to
know.
go down, and he wants to do that, and he's kind of leaning that way, but he also said to me, Kirk, I also feel like we're being had. Somebody's, and I think
I'm gonna
we
get
just
John
gotta
in
let,
there and then
and I'll just tell you my perspective. I don't worry. Ultimately, I'm not going to be torn or tied up in knots and worry because my salvation as a
That's
Christian,
right.
I know
That's right, guys.
where that comes
That's
from.
right.
I mean, I'm saved by the blood of Christ, but I'm not going to worry. But I'm also not just going to lay down and say,
No,
well,
we're not
it's going to
supposed to
happen.
lay down.
I don't know. I don't know if it's coming days, weeks, or months. In the meantime, I think God wants me to get up every day.
Yes.
And He wants you to get up every day and do the best you can.
Shine
And I'm
the
not going to
light.
fight a fellow brother, whether it's a Christian or a Jew or whoever, even an atheist who has a great heart and wants to help through a charity. I say, let's help these kids, but I don't believe that people in our county government, and I think we're going to hear more about that.
Yes.
Clay Jenkins, for example, has the authority to do what he's doing. I know that other commissioners on the court, like Mike Cantrell, have said as much. And so we do have things that we can do, whether.
That's right.
I think
Do
it's
what we
very.
can do.
I'm a news hound. I love to follow stories in history. I think what's unfolding here could be a really huge story, and to see what Governor Perry is going to do, whether it's going to be, because I think the whole issue with the National Guard is going to be shut down and co-opted. I don't think he's going to be able to achieve what we as Texans need him to achieve, to protect Texans through the National Guard. I think it's going to have to. He'll get there eventually, but it's going to pretty much it's going to be the state guard, if you want to say that that's the militia, the vestige of the militia structure. My belief is that our entire law enforcement structure in Texas needs to be revamped, to be reformed on more of a basis of a traditional militia structure. In that, the county sheriff, being the chief law enforcement officer of the county, is in command of that structure. The reason we have so many rogue officers, and I don't mean all police officers, but you see these, a lot of them are municipal
Military
police
style,
officers
yes.
who are doing things far beyond, they're violating the constitutional rights of American citizens, is because they don't fear any consequences. But if a police officer was under that command structure of the elected county sheriff, and everything was folded in under that, which I could make the case now that they are, but if they faced a court-martial instead of just their chief deciding, well, we're just not gonna, this investigation has gone far enough, well, they may behave differently. I think it would go a long
agree.
way to
Accountability,
limiting
yeah.
the abuses that we're seeing by police. And I say that as a peace officer. And most of the police officers out there are doing it for the right reasons, but it's just a few bad ones that kind of ruin it for the rest of everybody else.
Well, in Texas, I think you may have even brought this up, someone did, that you have to be in law enforcement to be deputized by the sheriff.
No,
Well,
I didn't think so.
If the sheriff has powers in an emergency situation, even
Yeah.
they've changed some of the legislation in recent years, the county judge as well, and you may know more about that, I'm sure, if you don't know already, you've been studying it, because But I think there's some tension set up that needs to be clarified, because the county judge can say, I've heard county judges say, I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the county, and I'm thinking, well, you're really not, because the sheriff really is, but, you know, some of this stuff, here's the false, and I'll just kind of leave you with this. The false choice is that we have to give up some part or all of our liberty for security. It's always for our own good. Well, that's just total BS. Because we don't have to give up any of our liberty for security. It's always liberty first. And I just can't say any more.
I know that we can keep going on with the questions. The only
I need
problem
to
is
wrap,
he's
yeah.
got to go to, and we want to get Ron up here too. So let's segue to this.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.
And thank you for all of your questions.
Maybe like 3 weeks from now, can we schedule a full hour?
Who knows what'll happen in the next
Who
few
knows?
weeks, but it'll be
It's going to be
interesting.
crazy busy. But okay. The next gentleman we have here, I'm very glad that he's here, because I've been telling you how we really need to support this gentleman, Ron Natinsky. Yes? Okay. Clay Jenkins is making his own case for electing this guy. So please tell us
A
everything.
little bit of
Okay.
change of tune here, and I imagine we will end up back with the immigration border issue when we're done, okay?
Okay.
But a little bit of a change here. How many people in the room really know what the county judge does? Okay, that's typical.
Yeah.
It is not a judicial position as you think about it. They don't hold court. Nobody's going to come before me as a county judge, you know, to hear your civil or criminal case or whatever. The county judge the title is a little bit of a throwback to the old days, when the county judge was the law of the land in the counties that are in Texas. In the urban areas, that morphed into having all the other judges that we have and so forth. Think of the county judge as the CEO/mayor of the entire county. There's 26 cities in Dallas County, there's 17 school districts. So think of the county judge sort of as the top of the pyramid for all of that. And while I'm talking, if you wouldn't mind, would you pass out those little brochures? All right, and those little bumper stickers. Okay, wait, okay, hold on.
I just remembered to answer your question regarding the judges. Their main duty is to be impartial and not take side to anything. They don't own the court, and that's it. All they have to do is judge people impartially.
Right, but the
They
county
cannot
judge
be
doesn't
biased
hold
or
court
prejudiced.
on anybody. The important thing is the county judge does not hold court on anybody, all right?
And we will
Let-
hold all questions
Yeah.
and comments until he's
Okay,
done.
no
Okay?
There's 2.5 million people live in Dallas County. It's a big budget, and I will tell you, from the years that I've been involved in political and civic things, people pay attention to their city councils, then they jump over and they pay attention to the state government and the politicians and the elected officials. And then they pay attention, and we've talked about it a lot here, the problems in DC. The reason nobody pays a lot of attention to the county government, especially in Dallas County, is for years and years we had good conservative people in charge that did the right thing. Actually, one of the things that's very interesting is when Lee Jackson was county judge, he set the county on a path to be debt-free by 2021. Okay? Pay off our debt, incur no new debt. If you have to build something, you pay cash. Okay? That's the way that it should be done. Now, we've taken a little turn since the Democrats have gotten in charge down there, and they're trying to whittle away not only at that policy, but a lot of the other things that are going on. A little bit about myself. I'm a business person. I am not a lawyer. I have a son that's a lawyer, but he's still my son. But so I am not a lawyer. And I think when you think about government, whether it's the city government, the county government, state, or whatever, you really should think of them as a business. The county spends over $1 billion of taxpayer money every year, and if you don't look at it from expenses and revenues and employees and other things, if you just look at it as something where the money rains in from heaven and we get to spend it on whatever we want, you're not really in control. So, I mean, from a perspective of who do you want to run the county government? A personal injury lawyer, which we have today, or a business person. And I say a business person can do a better job of it. The county government, as I see it, is totally out of control. In spite of the fact that we're trying to work our way out of debt, they went ahead and offloaded Parkland Hospital, and I could take a whole evening on Parkland Hospital, and they incurred $900 million of more debt. okay, to go build a hospital that basically, when you look at how Obamacare functions, it will put the hospital out of business. So guess who's going to get saddled with the responsibility of paying those bonds off? All of y'all, okay? So I think we need to change that, and we have an opportunity this year to do it. When my opponent, Clay Jenkins, if any of you don't know the name, when he announced for re-election, he had a two-pronged platform. He was going to continue to fight voter ID, and he was going to promote Obamacare. And I thought, man, God, you sent me a great thing. I can run against this dude, you know, pretty easy. Since then, he's promoting a $15 living wage, okay? He's now into immigration issues, and he's running it like a little junior Obama presidency, is what he's doing. He's doing it without the commissioner's court approval, without even telling anybody. He just goes and does this sort of stuff. I will tell you a little funny anecdote, because when Kirk left, he joked about, you know, who really has the power. Actually, Clay Jenkins got a piece of legislation passed in Austin that allows him, under the guise of being in charge of Homeland Security, to have red lights, a siren, and carry a badge as the county judge. That's how into this he really is. Instead of properly running the government of the county, he's more worried about, can he flip the siren on his car and speed through Island Park? So this is our year to get it back, okay? You know, you hear in the paper all the time about, you know, Dallas County has gone blue, you know, and it's battleground this and so forth. Let me tell you, it has really not gone blue. We've let the media tell us that it's gone blue. And this is the year we're either going to take it back or we're going to throw the towel in and all move somewhere else. We are only losing the elections because we're not showing up at the polls and we are not voting down ballot, okay? Now, we can use more people to vote, but we really have got enough people going to the polls, and I think enough people are mad enough this year that if we don't take it back, I'm leaving, because I'm going to give it my best. And you know what? If everybody that I've talked to in all the groups don't get off their duff and get down there and vote and get their friends to vote and vote down ballot, you all deserve what you get, okay? Now, let me give you some numbers to reinforce what I'm telling you, because it's not just empty, you know, rhetoric from somebody who's running for office. In 2010, we had enough people at the polls that the Democrats should not be in control. If everybody voted for Kay Bailey Hutchison and John Cornyn, those were the two top offices that year on the ballot statewide. If everybody that had voted, about 210,000 people, had voted all the way down ballot, not one Democrat would have been elected in Dallas County. Okay, because 30,000 people didn't go down the ballot. They got lazy, they quit voting. They vote for, you know, this one and that one and maybe their house rep. And then, I don't know, this judge guy, I don't even know what a county judge does. Heck, I'm not going to vote for him. 30,000 people didn't get that far down the ballot. So Wade Emmerich, who was running against Clay Jenkins, lost by 10,000 votes. Now, if you've done new math or old math, 30,000 more votes less 10,000 difference means Wade would have won by 20,000 votes. And so would everybody else that was down ballot that year, okay? So I don't really believe that we have turned into a blue county. We've let them have these elections, and it's our turn to take it back. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on with Clay, kind of segue into the immigration piece here, is that what he's done is sort of ruling like the president's ruling by executive order. He did not consult any of his fellow commissioners on the court. He didn't talk to law enforcement. He didn't talk to medical people. He talked to nobody. He went to the Democrat convention, which was being held in Dallas. And I think this whole thing, any of y'all remember the movie Wag the Dog?
Oh, yeah.
You know, okay. This is nothing more than Wag the immigration problem, or whatever you want to call it. You know, there's enough documentation to know that all this was happening, and basically along comes the Democrat convention, the state convention here, and he gets on the podium and announces he's got this great plan to house 2,000 immigrants here. And he's going to take care of them, and it's not going to cost you a penny, right? Because the federal government is going to pay for it all. BS, okay? Your tax dollars is the federal government at the end of the day. The lady left there when she was talking about the money. If it only cost us as much to take care of those kids as it does a prisoner in the jail, it's going to cost us $6 million a month for 2,000 kids. I don't believe we can do it for that amount of money, because these are kids, they have other issues, they've got to be, you know, whether they go to school or they don't, there's got to be all this other stuff. So my guess is it's probably twice that, which is coincidentally the same $12 million that maybe the governor is going to spend with taking the National Guard to the border to stop it. I personally would much rather spend the money to stop it and be done with it than to continue to spend it on a rotating basis. I will tell you that Clay Jenkins' plan is not to send anybody back. He was quoted the other day on TV where he said, we believe we can find relatives for 85% of them, and then the other 15% will find foster families to take care of them. And as soon as they come out of the system, there'll be 2,000 more, and there'll be 2,000 more, and they'll be on a rotating basis. 85 and 15 is 100, folks. So who's going back to Guatemala, Honduras, or what's the other country down there? I don't know. Somewhere else down there. El Salvador in Central America. If we don't stop it, what's going to happen is it doesn't take long for them to send back an email, send back a tweet, do a Facebook thing. Hey, I got it. Man, they got me housed up here. I'm in air conditioning. I'm watching closed circuit TV, and send on more. So the only people that make money out of that are the coyotes and the smugglers, and we get inundated, you know, with all these kids. Somebody said something about, you know, the compassion for the kids, and maybe the Republicans. We're all these hard-hearted. We don't care about any of that. And I'll tell you a couple things. I did a blast email today, and if any of you all didn't get it, if you give me your email, I'll get it to you. And I got out of 3,400 emails that went out. By the time I left the office, I'd gotten 2 people picking on me, okay? One called me a blank jerk for my position. I looked him up in the voter database. He's a hard Democrat. I don't know how he got on the mailing list anyway. He had to sign up, but maybe he was trying to, you know, I really don't care about him. The other one was from a guy, and I won't name the organization because it'd probably be unfair, but an organization that you probably know of that does things for kids, you know, boys and girls and, you know, young people. And, you know, he wrote me a nice email, and he said, you know, I respect what you wrote, but I don't agree with it because we have to have compassion. We've got to take care of these kids. You know, you just can't, you know, send them back and so forth and so on. And it was really not a bad email. So, you know, I looked him up. He was a Democrat too. But anyway, the point is that when I hear that we're going to put them up for foster care, we've got thousands of kids that live right here in Dallas County right now that need a good foster home. If all of a sudden the churches and the religious organizations and the philanthropic organizations are all of a sudden, because we have 2,000 immigrants coming here, all of a sudden their light bulb went off, oh gee, we got to collect clothes for these kids, we've got to collect money, we've got to do all these things. It's like, what were you doing last month when these kids needed a good foster home? Or what were you doing last month when a family needed some food from the North Texas Food Bank and they didn't have any food to give or whatever? You know, all of a sudden we've got this problem and everybody's becoming good-hearted. And I don't think anybody in this room doesn't have compassion for the situation that those kids are in. But what makes Dallas County the place that they all need to be sent to, and that we have to take care of? It's going to hurt us financially. He was rubbing his fingers together with the money. You know, many of y'all know the infamous or famous, whichever way you want to use it, you know, the John Wiley Price. I'm convinced the only people that are going to get the contracts from either the county or the state, or we won't get anything from the state, but from the federal government, are going to be those organizations that are supporting the position of the liberals in this country. You know, La Raza is not exactly a neutral, middle-of-the-road organization. Gee whiz, they get $100 million, you know, job to go do something in Dallas County. The other is that none of these facilities are going to be changed very simply. I've been to that school in Grand Prairie, which is part of Dallas County. You don't turn it into a dormitory with a cafeteria and all this stuff overnight. That's a major construction project. And I laugh when I saw Clay Jenkins walking with the deputy mayor pro tem of Grand Prairie door to door. And this guy says, oh, it's going to be great for our city. And I thought, gee, I know Ron Jensen. He's a conservative Republican. He's the mayor. Couldn't you get the mayor on TV? Why did you have to go 2 steps down in the ranking to find somebody? So I looked that guy up on the database. Here's a hard Democrat, okay? And then the door they go to where the lady comes out and says, oh gee, this would be good to have these kiddos playing in the neighborhood. Don't give me I mean, they're gonna be behind a high fence with barbed wire. There's gonna be trucks coming all day delivering food. There's gonna be security. There's gonna be all kinds of issues. They are not gonna have the same, quality of life in that neighborhood as if a school was across the street. And all this is being staged because once they get here, it's gonna be very, very difficult to get it undone. I mean, it's harder to send them back than it is to just prevent it, in the first place. This is nothing but sort of a junior Obama doing this on Dallas County. He's been quoted in the morning news as he would like to have a position with the Obama administration. I wish he would go get a position with the Obama administration, because at least we would know where he is at that point, okay, instead of in our own community here. So, I think we can make a change. We do need to get out there and work hard, and I don't mean it as a threat. I mean, we either take it back now, because in 2 years, it's going to be a presidential year. And as Kirk mentioned, that's a tougher election to deal with. Now, here's a bonus. Not only if you want to get rid of Clay Jenkins, we've got a commissioner's court that is 1 Republican and 4 Democrats. So even if he went to them for a vote, guess what? He's got the votes to do whatever he wants. The bonus is, when I get elected, you have 2 Republicans, and you say, well, gee whiz, there's still 3 Democrats down there, right? Let's come back to John Wiley Price. He is going to get indicted. He is going to be convicted. When he is convicted, he can no longer serve public office. He has to step down. Guess who gets to replace him? Come on, somebody in this group is me. The county judge, under law, replaces a vacancy on the commissioner's court. So not only do you get a Republican conservative county judge, you get the replacement for John Wiley Price at no extra charge. So, I could go on and tell you a lot of other things. I mean, like I said, Parkland is a morass. We've spent, one of the biggest things, I'll close on this because we talked about the kids and all that. About 60% of the county's budget is for health and human services, by law. I mean, the county is the health provider for the county. At Parkland, what we do, though, is we've allowed the adjoining counties, like Collin County as an example, to close their public hospital, and they send their indigent and needy to Dallas. And guess who pays for them?
We do.
You do. They don't even send them a bill to say, oh, by the way, you sent us 3,000 people last month. Send us a little money. You want to close your hospital? That's okay. But at least reimburse us for what it costs. They don't do that. So we're becoming the hospital and the medical center for Collin, for Ellis, for Kaufman, even pieces of Tarrant County. It's easy for people from Arlington to just come on over to Parkland. They don't have to drive all the way, into downtown Fort Worth, and we don't do anything about that. What I would rather do... Pardon?
Would you be able to have some change in there? Can you work on that?
Yes, absolutely. And here's what happens is, you've got all these health and human services, but you probably don't pass a week up where you open the front page of our liberal paper, and there's another investigation at Parkland, at the jail, at the sheriff's department, at the county. Every week there's sort of the investigation du jour, all right? And then I laugh when it says, well, we've got that fixed and it only cost us $72 million. And we've got this fixed and it only cost me $25 million. And we did this and it only cost $110 million. I would rather, if we've got that in our budget to pay money to fix stuff, I'd rather that money be used to take care of foster kids, to do other sorts of things, to serve what we're supposed to be doing, rather than paying it to consultants and studies and redoing stuff. We've spent, at last count, almost $600 million at Parkland on studies and consultants and fixing things, just to keep the hospital legal under the eyes of the feds. Okay? Parkland's budget is only $1.2 billion a year. I mean, we're spending about, that's over a period of years, so it's not really 50% of their budget, but it's a significant portion of their budget just being wasted. And the tax dollars that are being wasted are all of our tax dollars. So I implore you to do a couple things. Take those cards, get on my email list, sign up for a yard sign. If you can afford to send me some money, I hate to tell you this, campaigns cost money, okay? If everybody that's gonna vote Republican would send me $10, I'd have more than enough money to make sure we run a good campaign. That's not a lot. For 25, whatever you feel is appropriate. You cannot, and I just say this in all honesty, you cannot just say, well, I'm not gonna help get this done, because it won't happen by itself, okay? Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to the business associates, your people at your church, whatever. Educate them, get them to go to the polls, tell them to vote down ballot. There's a couple of sayings, you know, better to vote for Republican you don't know, or you're gonna get a Democrat you don't want. The other is, if you leave it blank, you're basically giving 2 votes to the other side, okay? At least if you vote, you're offsetting some of that. This election, if we're lucky, it'll be won by 10, 15, 20,000 votes, okay? There's what, 15, 20 people in this room. If every one of you went out and found 10 people and convinced them to get to the polls and vote the right way, you multiply that times everybody else in the county, we not only can win, we can win by a significant enough margin that we will again in the media be labeled a red county. Now, the end of all this is, if we don't take back Dallas County, I have been over to Tarrant County speaking to them, I've been to Collin County speaking to them. I will tell you, every county around Dallas is worried sick that this Democrat creep is like cancer, that it's gonna come across the county line and it's gonna take over Tarrant County, Collin County, Ellis, Kaufman, and the others. It won't happen next year, but it won't be a matter of years until it does. Without Texas being red, there are not enough electoral votes to elect a president. So then it doesn't matter who our candidate is, because we can't numerically make it happen. So it is really very, very important that we take back Dallas County. We show Battleground Texas that take your money, go spend it somewhere else, you know. Don't spend it down here, because we're gonna win, and we're gonna win by a big margin. So with that, I'll open up to any questions. I don't know what your time limit are, but you know, it's up to you. Yes, ma'am.
We had a gentleman come in, Kirk Hyde from the John Birch Society, and he said, when he's asked for donations for their campaign, the first thing he asked them is, how much are you gonna spend on voter fraud?
How much am I gonna spend? Well, let's talk about the elections department. If many of y'all were active when Clay Jenkins took office, one of the first things he did, he went down and got Bruce Sherbert fired, okay? For those of you that knew Bruce, he was as honest a guy as you could find. He was very careful never to lean this way or that way. He followed the rules, he ran a good elections department, and you could trust that if people went to the polls, at least you knew that he was reporting the right numbers. Clay got him fired and replaced with Tony Pippin's Pool. No one has any faith that the elections are being done in a fair manner. When I was on the Dallas City Council, we would watch elections by 9:30, 10 o'clock. All the results were in, all over, okay? North, south, east, and west. Now, if you watch the election returns, some people stayed up as late as 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning in the southern sector only to get the election returns. Well, guess what they're doing? They're down there stuffing the ballot boxes with the votes. They're going to the homes and they've got all their, you look at those ballots, the mail-ins on a lot of them, they all come from the same address and they all look like they're signed by the same person, okay? You can't fix that if you don't control the county government, okay? That's number one. The other is people need to get active. I do know Dallas GOP is still looking for something, you might remember the number, but they need like 80 or 90 precinct chairs in all of Dallas County. And if you're not, if you don't control the precinct, you don't get to be the election judge over that precinct. Guess who gets to be the election judge? A Democrat, okay? And you're second fiddle there. So the majority of these precincts that are out there, we don't even have a Republican watching what's going on. So if you don't start there, you're never gonna get down to dealing with the fraud issue. Voter ID, interestingly enough, the number of people that have been voting have been going up as a result of voter ID. The big gap in it, and it's the state legislature that has to fix it, and I truthfully don't know if they'll be able to, are the mail-in ballots. You got two groups of mail-in ballots. You got the over 65 ones that many of y'all in the room, I qualify. I know I don't look it, but I qualify to get one. You know, those are basically good ballots. But you also have the ones that are being harvested at the retirement homes and at the medical facilities, and the ones that I mentioned that all come back that look like they were signed by the same. The John Wiley Prices and the people of that ilk that run in the southern sector are going to continue to harvest those. So I don't know, there really isn't an easy fix to it. So the answer really is to get enough votes on the other side and make sure that we've got enough people voting and voting down ballot, and we can overcome all that. Long-winded answer, there really isn't, I mean, you
Well,
can't
he
just
said-
go.
He had a lot of suggestions, you might want to talk to him.
I-
His name is Kirk Launius.
Yeah.
It is.
No, I know who it is, but it's not, you know.
He had, you know, he
Yeah.
said in New Hampshire, they have a paper trail ballot, and it's
Yeah.
all, they've been working on it, you know, for years, and I don't know that much about it.
The problem is, and again, I'm not trying to be cavalierish about it, it's not an easy fix. You know, we've got more people living in Dallas County alone. In fact, our population is twice that, more than 2.5 times bigger than New Hampshire. So New Hampshire only has to deal like the north half of the city. You know, I mean, it's really, Maine is the same way. There's only like 1 million people living all of Maine. Well, we've got a lot of people here. We've got a big territory. Dallas County is about 900 square miles.
How many voting
Yeah.
areas would there be, how many voting areas are there in Dallas County?
Well, anybody that lives in Dallas County can vote in my election.
Depends. You mean like how many places where you can vote, polling places?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Oh, there's a lot, yeah. But
2,000, I mean, I just don't have.
oh no,
any
there's
idea.
probably, I mean, I've looked at the list. I can't remember the number. There's hundreds of places to vote.
Fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, John has a question
Yeah.
quick?
When the establishment of the GOP on the national level puts in forces in their choices for president, so for example, Romney and McCain, both of whom ran crappy campaigns, both of whom, neither of whom inspired much support as far as people in the grassroots of the Republican Party actually liking them. Their only virtue was that they weren't Obama. And when the establishment of the GOP does that to people, it has a trickle-down effect where people who are Republican may not only don't go and vote for the GOP's establishment's choice of president, but they also, people like yourself and others in between on the state level, don't get voted for because the establishment of the GOP has an agenda. If you look at how they have run some of the Tampa, in Tampa at the national convention, you literally saw there was a person who put their video camera in just the right spot and looked at the teleprompter when Boehner was reading from it, and it was already established how the vote was going to go. We saw it on the teleprompter, and he simply read his script. So we know from that and other pieces of evidence, the GOP, the establishment of the GOP is forcing their hand, and how they, ignore the Tea Party people on the grassroots. The grassroots doesn't mean anything to the establishment. And when they do that, you get hurt, and the people in the bottom of the food chain of the Republican
Right.
Party get hurt as well. So I don't know what the solution to that is, but that may be part of the reason why Dallas is blue and why the numbers of Republicans in their turnout and how they vote for the people in the bottom is so pathetic.
Right. Well, I mean, Republicans tend to be very analytical, smart. I mean, they just don't go in and say, well, the guys are, so let's just vote for them, you know. The Democrats will go in and they will just vote for anybody. They don't even have to be live candidates. I mean, anyway, they take, in DC, they take, convicted, mayors who've been convicted of drug charges, let them serve their sentence and then re-elect them to come back. We're doing that the same thing here. When I was on the city council, 2 weeks after I was down there, the FBI raided the city council. Not my office, thankfully. They took away 4 black council members down there, okay? And it had nothing to do with their color. They were all corrupt. And, they're serving jail terms. Well, a couple of them are dead, and the rest of them are serving jail terms right now, all right? Those same people that were involved in that are involved in John Wiley Price's thing. I mean, it's like nobody learns from that. They believe that, they can just keep doing this, and, I've heard rumors that, when John Wiley's indicted, that, there are going to be riots in the streets. You know what? So be it. because if he's doing something illegal, he needs to be brought to justice.
Do you think he will be?
Oh yeah, he will. I'll give you a little.
Is there a timeline?
No.
Because first I heard February of last year, and then I heard.
It took 3 years for them to get Don Hill and his wife and all them. Anybody here from Chicago? Okay, it's the chief thing's gonna be the IRS and money laundering and hiding, not paying taxes. He's clearly spending more than he's got coming in, and they'll get him on it. They know it's a sensitive issue. A lady named Kathy Neely rolled over and testified against Don Hill, and he only got 18 years. And guess what? She's already rolled over, and she's going to be a witness in John Wiley Price, because it's the survival of the fittest. She'd rather not be on the other side of the bars and on this side. So I think that's going to happen. We just need to be ready for it and do it the right way. As to the candidates at the top of the list up there, I will tell you that as somebody who's sort of been in this world to a degree, you wonder sometimes why some people run for what office, because there's either good candidates or there's not good candidates. That's it. And those that are good and those that are, have a good personality, connect with people, are usually the ones that do pretty good. A lot of people get caught up in the issues. I'm gonna tell you a little story. When I was on the city council, I'm a real conservative person, but we had an issue coming before us. There was sort of a half-assed smoking ban in place, and it was either we're going to loosen it up and people can either Wild West and they smoke wherever they want, or we're going to eliminate smoking in restaurants. Okay, so as a small business person, I think, man, I really don't want the government to come in and tell me what to do in my restaurant. I ought to be able to make that choice. On the other hand, you got the restaurant industry and the employees coming to you, and you got medical people saying, this is bad for your health. There's little skulls and crossbones on the cigarettes. You have now the Greater Dallas Restaurant Association saying, we want the ban in place because our employees, nobody will work in the smoking section anymore. So, at the end of the day, as a public official, you have to make a policy decision, okay? So I voted with the side to eliminate smoking. And you'd have thought the world was going to come to an end the next day. Every restaurant in Dallas was going to go out of business. Every bar was going to go out of business. Every pool hall was going to go out of business. That's what they stood in front of us and testified, that there would be no more restaurants for people to eat in Dallas, Texas. So rightly or wrongly, I voted with the side. We put the smoking ban in, and 2 days later, in my mailbox is a note from one of my neighbors. And he says, I'll leave the profanity out of it, but blah, blah, blah. He said, I've never smoked, I don't smoke, I don't want to smoke, but what you did on that vote is just terrible. It's communistic, it's this, it's that, and all this other stuff, And so I thought, well, I'm not bashful, so I went over to his house. And I said, hey, John, I got your note in the mailbox. I really, if you'd rung the doorbell, maybe you could tell me this face to face, but I said, you've supported me for all these years, you've sent me money. Are you telling me this is the only item out of thousands of things that I voted on that we disagree on? And he says, yeah. He says, other than that, I'm with you 100%. I love everything you're doing. You're pro economic development. You're doing all these things, and that's really great. But this one you pushed me over the edge. I can't support you anymore. I said, well, I guess my batting average is really pretty good, because we vote on thousands of things down there that affect people, and you try to make the right decision. Now, on this one, you and I have just agreed to disagree. I'm not going to apologize for it or anything, But what you are telling me is that the only candidate that you really could fully support all the time is probably yourself. So I think you ought to go down and run for city council. And you know what? I'll support you. And I just can't wait for the day where you make a vote that we don't agree on anymore. I said, one mistake out of 999 is really a pretty good batting average. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I do run into people that want the candidate to be a mirror image of themselves. And you can't do that and get elected. I'm just being blunt with you. There's going to be times you disagree with Ted Cruz. There's going to be times you disagree with Boehner. There's a lot of times we disagree with Obama. You know, and I think, you know, you have to be able to look at those things and not throw the baby out with the bathwater in a situation like that. I'm waiting to see who they're gonna run, because if they don't run somebody good nationally, that can get up on that stage and not fumble over counting to 3, you know, gee whiz, I'm gonna eliminate 3 departments. Let me see, education, whatever. And I don't mean that I'm all that great, but I was sitting on the couch when Perry did that. And I could see him stumbling over the last one, and I thought, man, he just needs to say there's probably a dozen more I could get rid of too. It really doesn't matter what it was. So if he'd been a good candidate, that's what he would have said, and he wouldn't have made that mistake. Of course, he's back there now with the new glasses. The Perry V2. So, you know, I don't know who it's gonna be. I hope it's somebody that is really good, that can get out there and rally the people. Pardon?
They're freaked out by Rand, and they're already putting people in place to take them out in Iowa.
Yeah.
Well, I think as someone kind of in the in journalism in a sense,
Yeah.
and going around and doing a lot of different programs, I see an emerging libertarian youth, and I think if the Republican Party, and I mean maybe you can kind of take this to heart too, the Republicans are very good about being very staunch about rules, and you know, more rules for this, more rules for that, and you know, we've got laws. I mean, over here you've got the Democrats being Santa Claus with their hand in everybody's back pocket, and over here you got the Republicans kind of having control issues. I would say you really need to appeal to the youth of America growing up who are more libertarian.
Well, you know, the Republican Party, you all probably know this, have what, 294 things in their plank. The Tea Party has, how many items that you have to agree with or disagree with?
5.
5. Yeah, I mean, I knew the answer, I was just testing you. You know, it's real simple. I mean, you know, you determine which side of the fence you're on real quick. You know, with the Republican Party, and I sat through the convention over there in Fort Worth, I mean, it was painful. I mean, arguing about, are we gonna get a new version of the Social Security card, or are we gonna get an old version of it? Are we gonna do this? Huh?
You stayed awake through the whole thing?
Oh yeah, it was painful. I mean, that's the only thing that kept me awake was the pain. You know, and when you talk about the youth, you know, I mean, the debate and argument over reparative therapy, okay? I don't know what the right answer is. It sounds like hocus pocus to me, but to get labeled in a position like that for something that not more than 10 people really cared about, you know, and that drags the party down, because the young people
Yes.
don't care about that issue.
They want to get rid of it.
Yeah, well, no, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's a different generation. And if you went back to my grandmother, you know, she'd probably think, you know, a lot differently than I do. And so we're sort of alienating some of the people that we really want to bring in. Somebody earlier talked about the Hispanic vote. You know, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. They're conservative, they watch their money, they're religious, they're family oriented. You go down all these attributes, I mean, those are our people.
Yes.
Okay? And, you know, the situation we've got us in over immigration really is being fanned by the liberals to make us look like we're the ones that really don't care. But at the end of the day, I've spent 40 years in international business. I travel all over the world. The only place, well, the hardest place to get into, surprisingly, is Canada. I mean, you think you're going to rob, you know, Fort Knox up there. But most of the other countries are not far behind, whether it's England or France or wherever it is. We're the one, oh, get here, no problem. Tell us where you might be in 2 or 3 years, and we may come, you know, call you up to have a hearing for you. Not in other places. Man, you're pretty much locked down.
Actually, you missed the hardest place to get into. That's for an American.
Where's that?
An American to get back into America.
Oh, well, okay. I don't know. I don't have that problem. I have one of those passes. But anyway, any other questions?
I bet there is. Let's let her ask it.
All right.
Where are you on aerial spraying of pesticides for supposedly for mosquito control?
For West Nile control?
Yeah.
Okay.
Versus dulcicides versus herbicides.
You know, this is kind of like the smoking thing, but if given my preference, I would prefer that we do not have aerial spraying. If you've ever read the label on that stuff, and you can go Google me, there was an article way back 10, 15 years ago about it, when they first started spraying. Now, I have to admit, I had sort of a selfish interest in it. I have a big fish pond in my backyard. So I went to the internet and I said, man, is this stuff good, bad, or indifferent? I wouldn't let that near my kids, my dog, or anything. It's terrible stuff, okay? Are there other ways to do it? Absolutely, okay? So, you know, but you look at our current county judge, I mean, he and Zach.
The whole court is that.
Yeah, he and Zach Thompson, you know, are out there that, you know, West Nile's gonna be it actually isn't the mosquitoes at the end of the day, really. It's really the bluebirds or blue jays or whatever they are that actually carry the disease. It's a lot better to throw those little larvicide things in or just get people to not have standing water around and you don't have a problem with it. But, you know, we went through a real bad year and it's kind of like the kids. You know, when they flash on the 10 o'clock news that 3 people have died, you know, all of a sudden, you know, what you read on the internet makes you begin to wonder whether maybe it would be good that they spray. But in the end of it, your chance of hitting one of those mosquitoes is slim to nothing. Somebody back here, yes, sir.
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
I'm gonna get a suntan if I stay up here.
I know, it's so hot, I do know that.
When was the last time you spoke at the city council?
That I spoke at the city council?
Where you called on the FBI, showed up after you spoke?
I didn't understand the question.
I overheard that you spoke at the city council.
No, I was on the city council from 2005 to 2011. Okay, in 2005, after I'd been there a couple of weeks, the FBI raided 4 other offices down there and took away all their papers and ended up putting them in jail.
Okay, how do you bring to the attention of the FBI, the corruption that's ongoing right now with the city council regarding Uber?
Regarding what?
Uber.
Oh, Uber.
Yeah.
Uber. Okay.
They disqualified the independent contractor,
Right.
which reached all level of government, the Treasury, the IRS, the Social Security, and the Medicare, and there go the benefit. It caused a great economical damage to the city of Dallas and the whole state of Texas. We steal the rules and regulation on the book for the past 3 decades, and they have every opportunity to kick their butt out of the city, and they still let them operate. Last smell corruption, 2.5 years, do not require scientific equation to deal with Uber.
If you roll back from 2005, anybody remember Al Lipscomb? Okay. He was caught and indicted and sent to prison over the same thing with Yellow Cab. I mean, it's just like a revolving door. They do it, they indict him, they take him away, they convict him, they put him in jail, and 2 or 3 or 4 years later, the next generation goes back and does the same thing. The Uber thing has more of an impact from an operational perspective, but not necessarily from a financial perspective. I'm giving you my opinion, okay? Nobody took any money, I don't think. They just, basically, the political powers said, we're so in bed with Yellow Cab, we're gonna make it difficult for Uber to be in business in Dallas, Texas. And as a result of that, they found out that Yellow Cab didn't have the required insurance, they weren't following the regulations, they weren't exactly, you know, clean in their own way of doing business. The bigger thing that's gonna come back and bite the taxpayers of the city of Dallas, not Dallas County, is this deal over fracking, okay? Whether you're for fracking or you're against fracking. The city had a contract with Trinity East to give them a license to frack on certain pieces of land that were out there. Then the city passed the zoning to eliminate the fracking. All right, that's going to end up costing the city of Dallas and the taxpayers that live in the city of Dallas hundreds of millions of dollars.
Because of the breach of contract?
Absolutely. They can't, you just can't give, I can't give him a license to open a restaurant and then the next day say, oh, but there's no licenses available on Mockingbird Lane where you were going to put one. I mean, so the city took, what was it, $36 million or something like that to balance the budget, you know, and, you know, what they should have done is made a settlement. There's some I mean, I wouldn't want fracking in my backyard, But you know what? The places they were gonna frack were in nobody's backyard. Okay, they were out there on undone land over by the, you know, whatever. But that, you know, if you don't want to do any fracking later, don't issue any more licenses. You had a couple little pieces of land. It's not gonna be worth it to the taxpayers, in my opinion. I'm just telling you my 2 cents worth, to pay a couple hundred, $200-300 million in penalties. And they're gonna lose the lawsuit. I mean, I guarantee you they're gonna lose the
I
lawsuit.
appreciate you taking the question. This is the last thing
All right.
I want to tell you. The city council now so corrupt. We are citizens of the city. I understand that the city council have governmental immunity to pass rule, legislation, or whatever, but they do not have an immunity not to enforce the rule. Now what they come up with, the last thing I heard at the committee meeting regarding Uber, that the chair said, we need to reinvent the wheel. And what it meant, it will be more of the same. Now they double the amount of permit. We are taxpayers like everybody else. If you want to regulate the taxpayer, but not just the industry that you're going to take more money, double $500 more out of 271 companies. But if you spread it through the whole thing, if you want to regulate, go ahead, you have my blessing. But don't take money out of my pocket. And I'm going to bring this to the city council. And if I can, I will try to get the FBI attention on this deal. There is no reason for 2.5 years giving them a green card to operate, and it's hurting our business. What they did, what we used to charge $300 going to Texas Stadium, now it's $81.
Because of Uber.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what they did, they're taking 20% from the top, which is 25%. They discount 30 to 60% to the consumer. That's making it about 85%. And then they tell the customer not to tip. That's another 20%. So what we left with is just paying the expenses, their expenses, and now they raised it 25% to 32%.
All right, let me just say this, and then we'll get off of Uber. Because Uber's not a county thing, but it's a city thing, but it has other effects. You know, sometimes people can become very resistant to change. I don't think Uber would have found the market in Dallas as welcome as they have found it had the existing cab operators upgraded their service. I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just,
No.
I've been through some of that. If they had taken and launched apps and done things. I was at one meeting, I used to chair the RTC, which is a 12-county transportation authority. And we were having a debate about, we're trying to do right by the taxi companies by saying, how about if we issue you one license, pay one fee, it'll cost you no more than you have to pay now, and you'll be licensed in all 12 counties. So you can go anywhere you want. To us, it sounded like a good deal. Does it sound good to you?
Yeah.
Okay, one regulatory thing, one thing to deal with and whatever. The independent taxi drivers, and I don't know if you're an independent or you drive for who you drive for, it doesn't matter.
Our own company.
Okay, it doesn't matter, the answer is still gonna be the same. One thing you learn from me, I just tell it like it is, you either like me or you don't like me, you smoke or you don't smoke, I don't care. I'm gonna do what I think is the right thing for the biggest, number of people. And so this gentleman, after the meeting, he came out and he said, I want you to come out here because, we don't want you to regulate the condition of the cabs. We think we can self-regulate the condition of the cabs. So I said, okay, fine. So I went outside the building, he took me over to his cab and he had it was a Chevy Lumina van, one of those with the long slopey nose, minivan, and he proudly opens the door and he slides the door back and he says, look at my van. Guys, gals, there is no way I'd have put this butt in that van. It was disgusting. And I pointed it out to him. I said, maybe we just don't think alike here, but I don't consider this the type of environment when somebody goes to DFW Airport and they're visiting Dallas, Texas, and you're gonna pull up with this and ask you to get in with your luggage and your kids, the seats are stained and brown or whatever. Now maybe that was an anomaly, and I believe that he truly felt that his van was absolutely top-notch. And I told him, I said, that's why we unfortunately have got to put some regulations in place. somebody needs to look at your van and make a judgment. It's either, good. It doesn't have to be brand new. It can be 7 years old as long as it's clean. One of the cities I go to all the time is Atlanta. They have no age limit on taxis. It can be as old as you want.
No, they changed the rule.
Well, okay, maybe they changed it. But it's got to be clean and presentable. And I will tell you, I get into some of those big 1980 Oldsmobile station wagons, with the Vista Cruiser thing. I mean, they're like historic, they're classic. But boy, they're clean, and they don't smell bad, whatever. So it doesn't matter how you get there, but you got to end up with something to where if somebody's going to the airport or whatever. And so all I'm saying is, I think what happened is the changing demographics of the younger people. I've got some people my age that use Uber. Surprised the heck out of me. We were at a party one night.
It's cheap, it's cheaper than a taxi.
Well,
I can carry 4 people going 3 miles for $15,
Right.
give $4 to Uber.
Yeah.
A cab charge $2.25, extra $1 for each one of them, and this consumer have an attitude, arrogant, that they think that they entitled to the whole world.
Yeah.
We don't want to have anything to do with Uber.
Yeah, well.
This is our money.
We got 2 more questions.
You didn't ask a question here.
Yes, I
Okay.
just had one more
Yeah.
statement. I've stated several times in various meetings that I thought that Thomas Jefferson was perhaps a time traveler from our time back to then to leave that message about the banking system
Yeah.
and the effect on the public. I think you're probably about 150 years older than you claim, or you're a time traveler from then. Because you were the first politician I've listened to for a long time who was a constitutionalist. And I appreciate that.
Well, I will tell you something funny before I get your question here. I went to high school here in Dallas. Now, I was born in Detroit, so it's a great place to be from. Okay?
Yes.
Got here as quick as I could in 1958. And when I was going to high school, one day, they used to call it, what do they call it? Civics. My civics teacher told me, Natinsky, you're not paying attention. One day, government is going to be very important to you. Now, she didn't know that I was paying attention. I just didn't look like I was paying attention. So after I got on the city council, I called her up, and I said, now I are government. Anyway, funny story. So, yes, sir. I appreciate the compliment. And I'm not 150 years old either.
No, I know that.
But I do get Social Security, okay? So that gives you a clue.
Talking about the power pivot strategy, went back when Kirk
Yeah.
Launius was here.
Yeah.
This gentleman talked about the
Yeah.
Federal Reserve, which is printing a lot of money.
Right.
And when they overinflate the dollar, it devalues it. Okay, so many people are very concerned, and with good reason, that there's going to be some kind of an economic crash. We have some leaked documents coming from Homeland Security. We have purchase orders for 2.5 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition. We have various military-grade assets being brought from overseas to the United States for law enforcement purposes. So we are now a police state. What, if you were elected for Dallas County Judge, what would you do to guarantee that constitutional rights and human rights were not violated if there was ever any kind of a martial law scenario within Dallas County?
Well, a couple things. First of all, the commissioner, well, you've got your county judge, you've got your 4 commissioners, and you got your sheriff, and all the other departments down here. So while the county judge has no direct authority to go to the sheriff and say, you shall do this or not do that, you do control the purse strings. That's always a very important thing. The other is the county judge by law becomes the person in charge if you declare an emergency situation, and certainly something like martial law would fall. I'm not advocating it, I'm just telling you. In a situation like that, the county judge then becomes in a position to direct, irregardless whether the sheriff likes it, doesn't like it, or whatever. So a lot of that is bully pulpit. A lot of it is whether you have the support from the other commissioners. A lot of it is how you interact with other governmental agencies. If you have a good relationship with the state agencies, you have a lot better chance of getting done what you want to get done rather than having it crammed down your throat. Okay? Texas, I think, you know, we are the only state that has, you know, the right to vote ourselves out of the union and all that. And, you know, we've heard about the secession and so forth. I think we're going to be, you know, a difficult situation for the federal government because our economy by itself is right up there with the economy of Switzerland. I mean, you know, we're not going to go out of business whether we're in the United States or we're out of the United States. And we have a huge impact on the overall economy of the United States. So, you know, do they want to tangle with us? But a lot of that depends whether you've got politicians with backbones. If you have weak politicians who are going to let the federal government roll over everybody and put laws, you know, these sort of executive order laws, they're not really laws, and do all that, I got news for you. If you give them an inch, they're going to take,
That's right.
you know, 6 inches, and then they're going to take
Right.
a foot. You know,
But I think his question was,
yeah.
if the dollar's devalued, you know, and that doesn't have anything to do with Texas, that's the Federal Reserve, no.
Well, but, you know, we've got, I mean, when you, everybody know who Richard Fisher is?
Uh-huh.
Okay. He does not believe the Federal, you know, Reserve System, the way it's functioning, is really doing it in the best interest of the entire nation or the economy.
It doesn't matter what he thinks anyway, I mean.
Well, yeah, but he's been ahead of it, okay?
Yeah,
And so, you know,
It's a nice thing to say.
yeah, but I really, I guess I'm somewhat of a conspiratist, but I'm also not, because I think the problem is if people stand up for their rights, the government's going to back off. They can only go so far. I have lots of ammunition in my house, and I have lots of guns, and I buy everything that I can, okay?
But the private Federal Reserve is not the government. It's a private.
You're right, but it's there, and I don't know how to get rid of it. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have control of both houses, the Senate and the Congress, and you have a president in place, maybe you've got a chance to go do something. But sometimes what you, and I don't know this, I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head, sometimes be careful what you wish for, because do you really want the equivalent of somebody's got to do all this stuff, got to move money around. Do you really want Obama moving it around?
Well, that's not the point.
Well, but it is, because
Let me just kind of capstone it here, we need to
Yeah.
finish up. Is,
Running out of tape, huh?
Exactly, and battery.
Okay.
If we have some kind of catastrophic emergency here, and that's actually a definition of classification.
Yeah.
It could be economic, it could be power, it could be any number of things. If you are county judge at that time, I would urge you to tell the feds, we have it handled here.
Yeah.
And then do our best to do that, because that really is the key. If you let them in,
You know, that's the one thing that Perry did that was smart. A lot of people are saying, you know, you know, when he didn't take that federal money, because all it is just a
It's a
carrot.
string.
Get us addicted to it,
That's right.
and then we'll take that away later. And then, by the way, then you figure out how you fund it, you know, yourself. You know, at that point, you've got to stand up and do what's right. And but you've got to be able to have working relationships with other people to understand it, because you can't stand out there by yourself. They'll just take you out. So
Right.
anyway, I appreciate it.
How long is your term of office?
It is 4 years.
4 years, okay.
And-
What other things? Really a timeline, reasonable timeline for John Wiley Price, because that would be awesome to appoint somebody.
You know, I think he'll probably be indicted this fall. It is not going to be a pleasant trial. It's going to be a year, 2 years. He's going to drag it out as long as he wants. Actually, that's fine, because I don't really want him to indict him and convict him while Clay Jenkins is in office, because he'll just, you know, appoint his own little, you know, clone to that position. So that part of it is okay.
Right.
And I will tell you that you do have an opportunity, you know, you've got Elba Garcia, who is on the Commissioner's Court. She served on the City Council. Her husband may be Domingo, and he may be on another planet, but, you know, I think she understands enough about how, you know, how things go, that you can sit down. You may not win everything with her. Teresa Daniels is coming up for re-election next cycle, not this one. Somebody in that district needs to get out there and plan on running against her. She's not dynamic. She's not a powerful, you know, candidate. we talked earlier about, good candidates. I mean, it'd be tough to run against Elba, but it wouldn't be tough to run against Teresa. So, you could end up with a 5-to-1 commissioner's court, and you're in a whole different dynamics when you've got that situation.
Awesome.
One other quick question.
Yeah.
We all come from somewhere. What's the origin of your family name?
My grandparents came here at the turn of the century from, depending who owned, when I say owned, who had control of that part of it. It was either Russia or Poland, depending on who was at war with whom.
Right.
So my parents were born here, and so I guess you could consider myself, what am I, second generation U.S.
Right.
And so, I mean, all of us came from, for the most part, from somewhere. I do have a friend of mine. She's like a 7th generation Texan, she claims. Well, I mean, I took 30 years for every generation, and Texas wasn't even here then, but she's very proud of it. So,
5 generation, but.
yeah, that's a little stretchy.
Seven may not.
Anyway, I appreciate y'all's
Thank
support.
you.
It is going to be a tough election, but we can win it. And I tell you what, the game changes once we get control down there at Dallas County, because a lot of these shenanigans, just simply, go away at that point. Let me give you one other scare tactic. I know you.
Okay, no.
Being from Detroit, I just thought of this. This is good. Don't leave yet. You'll like this one. All right, go ahead. I'll tell you later. They can tell you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Every year they do a study of job growth in the United States, county by county. How many people lose jobs? How many people gain jobs? Okay? In 10 years, the cycle is, it's in a rolling 10 years. Okay? Dallas, Texas has lost 266,000 jobs in 10 years. Dallas County. That doesn't count the 4,000 that went to work in Plano for Toyota or anywhere else. Dallas County has lost 266,000 jobs. Okay? Guess who's lost? We're number 2 at the bottom of the list. We're down here. Guess what city is the actual lost the most jobs? Detroit. I mean, what claimed, and how long have the Democrats been in charge? About 10.
You were almost from Chicago.
Well, almost.
From Detroit, it was in Chicago.
So while the rest of the country, and if you hear other people, you've probably heard these people, if you listen to the House of Representatives, you listen to the governor, whoever, 1,000 people a day are moving to Texas. That's true. We've got a great economy and we're doing great. We're just not doing great in Dallas County. And that's why our taxes continue to climb every year, because we're not spreading that over a bigger and bigger base. So for such a thriving region in the country, the North Texas region moved from number 4 to number 3 largest economic engine in the United States, except for the hole in the donut that's made up of Dallas County. Tarrant County is growing, Collin County's growing, Ellis County's growing, Kaufman's growing, Rockwall's growing. We're not growing. Think about that, 266,000 jobs lost.
But Dallas increased 100,000 in population last year.
The city of Dallas.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is just jobs. It has
Yeah,
nothing.
no, I mean, that even makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's only 2.5 million people in the county, so that's in excess of 10% of people.
Well, think
Not
no.
all people have jobs.
Say half the people don't work. Half are either homemakers or too old or too young or whatever. So take 1.2 million and take 266,000. I mean, it's 20% of the population. Of the working population is what we lost in those 10 years. And if we had all those people working, you spread the taxes over all of them, the economy's better, and our taxes end up being lower. The only way you control taxes is by growing the economy and spreading it over a bigger number of people. Then you can lower the taxes. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is, it always irritates me when you hear your public officials, we're so proud that we didn't raise the tax rate on you this year. Okay. The problem is that DCAD, the appraisal district this year, on your house is going up 7%.
Yeah.
So when they announce in September, when you hear the county, I guarantee you, they are going to announce they're so proud that there's no tax increase. But your taxes are going to go up. The money that you write your check for is going to go up 7%. And then they're going to spend 7% more money.
So at the end of the shell game, the shell game.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll see you again.
good things. I'm so glad he's a businessman. That is so true. I mean, listen to him. I think that's all great. One thing I'll say as activists for truth is a disclaimer. We all both, it's good versus evil, light and dark. So we don't necessarily always look at it just as a political party type affiliation kind of thing. It's like there's good and bad in both, you know. But you, in particular, are running as a Republican, so without a doubt. And also our lack of knowledge for these offices. We've been working on that for a year now, trying to, you know, get people to know more about it, because people don't know. And these things affect our lives a whole lot more than,
I never
so.
passed the first two, because
I know.
I never know who
No,
anybody is.
but we're gonna change that. Thanks, so, okay, thanks everybody for coming,
I
and,
have some information.
okay.
Yesterday I was at a huge protest on behalf of the Gazans and the Palestinians. Hundreds of people came out. They marched several blocks because it wasn't quite as high as it was the previous week. Today there was a gathering about 25. I was out there during rush hour, so I'm so sweaty. The next one is going to be
When's the next one?
Friday. This Friday, they're going to pray at 1. They'll probably start protesting around
Same place, Dealey Plaza?
Dealey Plaza.
Graciano, Dealey Plaza, what time, sir?
They'll pray at 1
1 o'clock.
because their fasting season's coming down to an end.
Okay,
And the protest will probably start around 1:30 or 2.
okay, and as far as I believe, it's the Gaza.
And you don't have to be,
Okay.
you don't have to be Muslim or
No.
signs say you don't, it's just, all you have to have is a human.
A human, yes, I am not for killing people as it is, you know, this is the, so, I agree with that, 100%. Thank you for coming, goodbye everybody, we'll see you next Monday, okay. And get a yard sign, yes. Okay, are we done, John? John?
Oh, and Sunday.